programmes for today. They start again tomorrow morning at the usual.
Facing northwards, across central Wales, runs a great mountain wall, from the Black Mountains in the east to the similarly named Black Mountain in the west. And right in the middle, highest head and shoulders above them all, are the Brecon beacons, those twin peaks over my right shoulder. They reach up 880 metres. On a map of South Wales, we can see the beacons located between Brecon and Merthyr Tydfil. With the Black Mountains and the Black Mountain, the whole of this area is a national park. But unlike some national parks, the Lake District and Snowdonia, for example, the scenery here isn't violent and jagged. It's more a scenery of steep scarp slopes and gentle dip slopes. And that's because of the nature of the rock. Here, the surface rock is old red sandstone. The scarps face north, and the dip slopes run south towards the rim of the South Wales coalfield. It's a beautiful area, and it's enjoyed by a lot of people who come here for the scenery. Most of them centre their activities on the building just over my left shoulder, which is the Brecon Beacons National Park Mountain Centre. Grown-ups and children come here to take advantage of all the facilities that the centre provides. Detailed local information is given for the keen fell walker, while for the more casual sightseer there are magnificent views of the north face of the beacons from the centre itself. The centre is located 7 kilometres west of Brecon. By following a line from Brecon southwards to Merthyr Tydfil, a line bounded by the Story Arms Adventure Centre in the west and the Taff Fechan Reservoir in the east, we can examine some of the distinctive natural and man-made features of the scenery. Let's begin at the old market town and bridging point of Brecon on the River Usk. Brecon is a gateway to west central Wales. It is an important commercial and administrative centre. In the narrow streets, farmers from the Usk and Wye valleys and from the nearby mountains mingle with the townspeople and holidaymakers. From the town, the land rises gently to the south, across lush green pastures which contrast with the sparser grasslands of the Beacon's escarpment. The highest peak on the horizon is Pen y Fan, reaching to 872 metres. The escarpment rises to this peak from an almost level lowland. From the Usk Valley, nothing stands in the way of these views of the north face. The Beacons are part of a large geological structure which extends to the South Wales coast. In this diagram, we can see in a simplified way this structure. The Beacons are formed of old red sandstone. Moving southward, the sandstone sinks beneath Carboniferous limestone, which is followed, further south, by Millstone grit. Approximately at Merthyr Tydfil, these rocks are replaced at the surface by coal measures. Undoubtedly, the easiest way to traverse the transect from Brecon to Merthyr Tydfil is to use the A470 road. Leaving Brecon, this road follows the line of the Tyrrell Valley, which leads southward into the Tafvawr Valley. In this valley, there are few buildings. The Story Arms Adventure Centre is the most noted landmark. From the Story Arms, a grassy road runs northward, running parallel to the main road. This is the old Drovers Road, now a popular footpath for walkers, but once the route along which drovers took their animals for sale to the Midlands from the farms of South Wales. That was before the Industrial Revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries, for in those centuries the trade flow was reversed. As the population of the industrial valleys rose, the demand for food increased. Along the drovers' roads were driven mules and donkeys carrying butter, bacon and ham from central Wales. Rock outcrops on the valley side near to the Story Arms show us some of the distinctive characteristics of the old red sandstone rocks. These rocks are sedimentary rocks. They were formed in great layers deposited in the waters of seas which disappeared millions of years ago. Originally, the deposits would have formed almost horizontal layers, but great earth forces which created mountains and basins changed the structures of the rocks. The name Old Red Sandstone suggests that the rock's all the same the whole way through, but in fact that's not so. And this waterfall on the side of the main road from Brecon to Merthyr Tydfil shows it very, very nicely. For example, here I'm standing on some very hard sandstone indeed. But let me walk up just a little bit further, and it's changed to shale. Very much softer, more easily broken. Further still, back to the hard sandstone. And further up, we're back to a shale again. This shale here, you can see it down there, and you can see that above the shale, hard stuff again. And here, the shale, which is very, very soft indeed. It's weathered down into a clay, and it's been undercut by virtue of the weather, with the result that great chunks of this heavy sandstone here have fallen down. And above this sandstone, there's some conglomerate, which is a mixture, which is a stone with a lot of pebbles in it, rather like plum pudding. And above that, more sandstone. And they're all dipping in the same way. And if you were to look at that hillside up there, you'd see that that shows the same line of dip. There's the gentle line of the dip slope running in a southerly direction from the summit of the escarpment. But the dip slope is complicated by the effects of glaciers and rivers. About halfway between Brecon and Merthyr Tydfil, on the east side of the main road, is the Nantcrew Valley, and it's a nice example of what happens under periglacial conditions. P-E-R-I, glacial conditions. That simply means conditions that aren't quite glacial, they're on the periphery of being glacial. When the Ice Age was in full flow, the ice caps, enormous ice caps, came down and they gouged out mountain valleys and made them U-shaped. But round about the edge of the glacial ice caps, no such action took place. What happened was that it was extremely cold, the ground was frozen stiff, and then perhaps it would thaw a bit, so any loose material, any soil that was around, tended to slide down the frozen ground and to fill the valley bottoms. Now, this Nantcrew Valley is cut into the old red sandstone that forms the Brecon beacons. They're just up there. But you don't see any rock exposed, any red sandstone exposed. You might see the odd red patch of soil, and that's all. And that's because the valley is full of this material that slid down during the Ice Age. But an interesting thing, you see, that formed a V-shaped valley. Well, since the Ice Ages, the stream here, it's only a small one, has begun to excavate its way down through all that material that had slid down. So now, if you look up there, you'll see there's a long V shape, and then just at the bottom, the slope suddenly steepens, another little V. That's what this river has done to that material since the Ice Ages. A similar valley, the Tough Vechan, running from the reservoir towards Pen y Fan, cuts deeply into the eastern side of the dip slope of the beacons. By cutting across the dip slope, it effectively breaks the dip slope of the beacons into two parts. Whereas the Nantcrew is distinguished by its smooth valley sides and rolling grassy surfaces, the Tough Vechan Valley is quite different. On its northern side, it is bounded by steep slopes falling from the beacon's summit line. These higher slopes are divided by that saddle. That saddle was used by the Romans as part of the route for a road which crossed the beacons from north to south, a much more difficult route now than the line of the Drovers Road just 5 kilometres to the west. From near the saddle, we can see the slopes falling from Pen y Fan to the forest plantations surrounding the Noyad reservoirs. The altitude of the beacons ensures an adequate rainfall. For the industrial valleys to the south, valleys like the Tough Vechan were vital for providing unpolluted water for industrial and domestic use. This reservoir demonstrates the holding capacity of the underlying rocks. Unlike chalk or limestone, the old red sandstone is a good base for reservoirs. The reservoirs and the surrounding forests are relatively new additions to the scenery of the beacons. The first of the 4 reservoirs in the Tough Vechan Valley was opened in 1895. The forests are even more recent, for few of these plantations are more than 30 years old. As you can see, the trees are coniferous. In the Middle Ages, the valley floor and lower slopes were covered with deciduous woodland, but these trees were axed in order to increase the amount of agricultural land. Today, as you can see, these forests are carefully planted and the trees are felled for commercial purposes. These plantations are on the southern side of the Tough Vechan Valley. This forms the second escarpment of old red sandstone. It runs in a northwest to southeast direction. From this summit line, the land falls in height as we travel southwards. The rock also changes at the surface from old red sandstone to carboniferous limestone and then to millstone grit. These rocks outcrop in a narrow band approximately following the east-west line of the head of the valley's road, a few kilometres north of Merthyr Tydfil. Limestone is quite different from old red sandstone. Although they are both sedimentary rocks, the limestone is permeable. It permits water to pass through it easily, and it is also soluble. It is unsuitable for reservoirs and for afforestation. However, it is quarried because it's important in iron making. But of much greater importance is coal extraction. 14 kilometres west of Merthyr Tydfil is Rigos. Here at Rigos, coal is being removed by open cast methods. The cover of rock is removed to expose the coal seams. At this site, the seams are being excavated to a depth of 100 meters, and the overlying rocks are mainly carboniferous shales. The coal is anthracite, and the main seams being worked are between 0.7 and 2.5 meters thick. In open cast mining, care must be taken to store the surface soils, which will be relayed when the mine has been worked out. Sometimes the land is returned to farming use, though frequently coniferous plantations are planted on the reclaimed land. Here, the coal is being removed by massive dragline cranes. The production of coal from this mine is approximately 400,000 tons per annum. In the early industrialisation of this part of South Wales, coal was less important than charcoal. The availability of limestone, black band iron ore occurring in the sedimentary rocks, and timber from which came charcoal accounted for the early iron industry here in the first half of the 18th century. Progress in technology led to the replacement of charcoal by coal as the fuel in iron making, and the local coal was removed conveniently from surface outcrops. Large ironworks were built at Dowlais, Penydarren, Cyfarthfa and Pentrabach, all located along this rim of the coalfield in the middle of the 18th century. To this area were attracted ironmasters such as Guest, Brecon and Crawshay. In the 19th century, the ironworks were converted to steel production, and Merthyr Tydfil became the largest iron and steel producing centre in the world. By 1831, it was the most populous town in Wales, but the prosperity was short-lived. Large new steelworks were opened on the South Wales coast, dependent on imported iron ore, though coal and limestone continued to be transported down the valleys. Reminders of 19th century iron and steel production are still present in the names of local buildings, in workers' houses, and the now derelict old stables for the ironworks. Viewed from the air, we can see the extent of Merthyr Tydfil. The town dominates the head of the Taff Vale. It is confined to the south by the valley sides and spreads out more to the north in the area known as the head of the valleys. In the 1920s and 1930s, during the period of economic slump and unemployment, Merthyr Tydfil was one of the worst hit towns in the whole of Britain. Since then, the population has declined. In 1931, there were 71,000 people living here. Today, in spite of local government reorganised extended boundaries, the population is 10,000 fewer. Instead of being dependent on coal mining, the iron and steel industry, the town's economy is now based upon new consumer light industries like this washing machine factory. The introduction of light industry has provided many jobs for women, a sharp contrast with the traditional heavy industries in which few, if any, women were employed. Running south from Merthyr is the Taff Vale, one of the deep trench-like valleys which run through the plateau of the coalfield and which typify the industrial scene in South Wales. In this part of Merthyr Vale, the Upper Taff, coal mining continues to dominate the local scenery. The mines, roads, railways and homes of the miners are concentrated on the lower valley slopes. Lacking space on the crowded valley floors for the pit waste, great heaps were built high up on the valley slopes. These coal tips, mini black mountains, were not considered to be particularly dangerous until, in 1966, part of the Merthyr Vale colliery tip moved, and coal waste, saturated with rainwater, engulfed the primary school at Aberfan, killing 116 children and 28 adults. The tips, which previously had been regarded as ugly scars of the Industrial Revolution, were now seen as dangerous to villages. To improve the environment, several projects have been introduced with local and national government support. The environment is being improved in terms of safety and in terms of appearance. Open country areas near to large population centres are sometimes described as the lungs of the cities. Merthyr Tydfil is only 3 kilometres from the Beacons National Park. Undoubtedly, the largest number of visitors to the park arrive by car, and they view the scenery either from their cars or from picnic spots. Forests, reservoirs, steep slopes and open moorland produce rich scenic variety. As yet, the landscape may suffer more from afforestation than overcrowding. Though as the national parks become increasingly more popular, this situation is likely to change quickly.